Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box. And today's episode is going to freak out a lot of people because for all of my life, the year 2000 was the future. It's when the aliens were going to come. Not that kind of. Yeah, never mind. You had to be there. It was when the computers were going to all simultaneously have a Harry Carey session. It was when the world was going to end, but somehow the future would be here, and nothing really happened. But in the world of music, something did, and it was almost as cataclysmic as all of that crap. And this is the release of the Marshall Mathers LP, the second album of Eminem, the album where he really didn't hold back and came into his own. It was a triumph for him. It was the fastest selling rap album ever. It had a lot of rap royalty, particularly from the West Coast. He wasn't a West Coast guy himself, but he was discovered and produced by Dr. Dre, who brought in Snoop Dogg, Nate Dogg, Exhibit, and lots of other rappers from the Dr. Dre universe. And this album at the time shocked people. In fact, it was one of the last mainstream albums that still had the ability to shock. Because while rap had always been something that censorious Tipper Gore type of people didn't like, the fact that Eminem was white and brought this genre that was already being widely consumed by white suburban audiences, but he brought it really into the front and center of white suburbia because as someone born in a trailer park, he was sort of the person on the edges of respectable so-called white society. And the suburban white music consumers of the day really ate it up. And he was someone who was in some ways even more direct in his language and in his concepts than a lot of other rappers. He didn't sort of dress things up. He was a great rhyme smith, but he wasn't one to sort of hide what he was getting at in his music. Some people at that time were still asking, well, can a white guy really be a rapper? And others say, well, of course, just listen to his skills. So it was an interesting time in music because it was really one of the last times prior to the decentralization, just prior to the decentralization of the music industry, when you still had a record industry and an MTV, think Total Request Live, that got all people who are young music consumers commenting on, thinking about, and listening to the same thing. Then older generations had their reaction to him. And he was someone who was edgy at that time. He was challenging the fact that the world, because the 90s was sort of that first generation where we really heard the term being politically correct getting into things. People got soft, and people, even though Tipper Gore might have lost one battle, she and her shrewy companion sort of won the battle to make people refrain from saying what they really think. People using what George Carlin called this soft language that was becoming ubiquitous in the 90s, language used to hide reality. And Eminem was having none of it. He was calling people every name under the sun. And people loved it because people like realism. And when there are people like the censors who wanted to make people what at that time would be called politically correct. Now, I suppose you'd call it woke. I'm sure there'll be a new word for it tomorrow. I just call it tyranny because it's tyranny. But Eminem was really a accidental crusader for free speech because his free speech was encouraging others and it was a pushback against the politically correct mafia of those Clinton years. And it is kind of funny today that Eminem is now part of the woke establishment. But hey, everyone's got to become a grandmother sometime. But back then, he was someone who was edgy and controversial, way back in the year 2000. Spooky. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.